teaching, even when he was getting his teeth fixed, he would, right in the middle of it, masters can be kind of funny, right in the middle of having this machine drilling in it, he'd suddenly start talking, and poor David Gate would pull it out and go, oh no, you know, and kind of get David Gate panicking, and he said, now calm down, you know. Well, he was talking about how I feel Om in my forehead. And he would just suddenly start talking like that. Yes, OSHO, that sounds very nice. Now open your mouth. And he said, I want to tell you, I feel Om in my forehead. Oh, that's okay, OSHO, that's really great. It's interesting. Said, no, you can feel it too. Put your finger on my third eye between my brow. And I asked him, what do you feel? And he said, yeah, I felt a pulse, an interesting pulse. Wow. And then he just, matter of fact, OSHO said, when Om descends into my hara, into my belly center, then I'll have 6 months to live. Oh. And so, yes, OSHO, of course, panicking. David Gate, he's always got him panicking, so you could look at his panic. And, you know, 6 months later, several months later, it was August 1989, I guess it was, and he suddenly, out of the blue, almost like continuing the conversation that David Gate had completely forgotten, said, Om is in my belly, is in my hara now. Oh, that's nice, OSHO. Very nice. And, you know, and then it was later when he realized that was like Osho's subtle way of saying the countdown has started. Wow. You know, so, wow. But he died. I had the honor of, I was one of his guards in his household in the final days. Well, the final few years. And a lot of my books came to me sitting under his almond tree under the Indian moonlight in his garden with him just a wall away sleeping. But I could often hear him playing this beautiful, he had an incredible sense of classical Indian music. And I also saw his favorite film, Baiju Barva, I can't even say it, but it's about a famous musician that lived in the times of Akbar's court, when Tansen was the court musician, and they were two great sitar players. And so OSHO was an accomplished modern artist. It was quite remarkable stuff. And he used to take his watercolors and dip them down into the 4 pages of his books. He had a library of like 100,000 books, which he had a photographic memory. He could read a page in a second. He used to go through 70 books a week. Wow. And he'd retain them. And that's one of the reasons why he could talk on everything. He said, I understand the Western mind, he used to say, because I've read everything you've written. And then when we got less literate and we started getting into our video TV scenes, he started watching movies by the hundreds to see what we were watching in our visual lives. But anyway, I was a guard in his household, and I remember when he left his body, it was really remarkable because I was one of the guards that escorted the other guards who were carrying him down to the burning ghats. And these burning ghats happened to be a place back in 1980 when I first came to Poona. I lived next to the burning ghats, which is where people of all castes come to be burnt. Buddhists, Hindus, the Muslims had their own graveyards, which were kind of interesting in Poona because a lot of the bones were sticking out of the ground. It was kind of interesting. That was next door. But like a good double Scorpio, I happened to be living next to the burning ghats. And so there I am in my orange robe and mala and sannyas clothing, and I used to walk down. When the tinkling bells were happening, it meant somebody was coming in to be burnt. And so I walked in, and I used to sit in front of the burning bodies and observe the destruction of the human body. Wow. And then the next night I would meditate on the skull and the bones left from the fire. And the third night I would sit and meditate on the empty, washed-out pit. Wow. One of those pits, 10 years later, my own master was laid down into it, and I was guarding him for 3 nights, mainly to protect the people who would think they could reach into the coals and pull out some vibhuti or holy ash or something, because it was actually white hot. It would burn themselves severely, so we were there more to protect the people from doing that. And So the day that he was that it was the third morning, the family came. They poured water into the ash, and I always wondered how you could separate wood ash from person ash. And what happens is when it's wet, wood ash is brown, and person ash is white. You can see the outline of OSHO in there, the melted pearls on his hat. I could see his bones, which were all iridescent, all laid out quite neatly. And it's an amazing ritual in India. It really helps and compassion. It's hard, but it helps people to understand how you're walking, talking one moment, and then you die, and then 3 days later, your beloveds are reaching into the gooey ash and pulling out your bones, crushing them, and putting them in an urn. It really brings home the feeling of how you're not the body.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because we'll have to talk about this some other time, but I've had a lot of extensive work with hauntings, ghosts, and exorcism and stuff like that. What I've noticed is that in India, especially in the non-Muslim areas of India, you do not have a lot of hauntings because the Indian practice of open air, burning the body, the spirit sees it happening and lets go. Huh. But look at our places where we hide death and throw it under the ground, under the rug as fast as possible. You've got a lot of hauntings.
Yeah.
People don't know they're dead.
Right. And then, of course, I've heard that people who die suddenly in car accidents or 911 type things, that they don't realize that it happens so quickly that the spirit just remains, and that's the same situation.
Well, I was in one. I have had 3 brushes with death, 2 which were sudden. And the most sudden, I had a premonition. I had just come back from India, and I was walking in San Pedro out of my door. I was going to meet my girlfriend who was in Laguna Beach, and I had to drive through Long Beach to get to them in L.A. And so just as I'm getting to the door, I'm feeling this incredible presence over me, like I'm going to be squashed like an ant by a giant who's so big I can't even see it. And it was this ominous feeling. And then I was tearing at the door, and a friend of mine said, well, what's the matter? I said, I don't think I'm supposed to go. Maybe I shouldn't go driving or something. It's just like, I feel like I'm going to die. And then I just shrugged off. Something pushed me through the door, like an invisible hand pushed me through the door. So I went, got in my little 2-door green Maverick. 20 minutes later, an illegal alien without a license in his brother's car, which was a huge station wagon, creamed through a red light at 55 miles an hour and hit me in the door of my car.
Wow.
And they gave me up for dead. I know because somebody watched the whole thing and was the person who called, some guy from Ohio, and he was a tourist seeing Long Beach, and there was a pool of gas, and I was white. My neck looked like it was broken. Of course, I was very limber then, so they thought, and they couldn't open up the door, so they were working on the other guy who was injured. And suddenly I came to after 20 minutes, and it was almost like they were freaked out. I came to, first thing I noticed is my mala with OSHO's picture on it, and I said, well, at least that's not broken. And I looked around, and it seemed to be okay. I laughed. I giggled at the pedals of the car, which had been twisted into a bow tie, which was interesting.
Wow.
Drive shaft was bent. Most of the force of the crash hit the dashboard, which was an accordion, and fortunately, so I didn't get that. But I also wear my seatbelt. Very good thing to do, because the only thing that I hit was my side of my head into the window at 55 miles an hour as a reaction to the force.
I've done that too.
I've only had a slight concussion. Wow. So anyway, I hear this tap, 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 and there's this guy with a grip of life thing and this other paramedic, and they got the big vice grips to tear me out like a can, and this guy goes, can you get out? And I very calmly said, yeah. Of course, I had been in another place. I had been given the choice to come back, and that's a whole other story that I can tell. But I opened the door and stepped out in my kurta, all maroon with my mala and a red stocking cap, and I walk out, and like people just backed off and just like, oh my God, Indian-looking guy coming out of walking into this pool of gas, and here comes across the road, splashing away, was this man with suspenders trying to hold this huge belly. He looked like a walrus, and he suddenly ran up, and just shows you how shocked the paramedics were. He ran up and grabbed me up and scooped me up in his big arms and said, "Oh, man, brother, it's so lucky that you're alive." And he started running his hand up and down my mouth and said, "Them sure good beads." I said, "Yeah, they are." And then I turned to the paramedics and saying, "Look, I'm missing some time, and I feel a slight pain in the top of my head. I think I have a concussion. I think you ought to take me to the hospital for observation." And suddenly they snapped out of the jaw-dropping look and said, "Oh, yeah, right, let's go."
Hop right in.
But the thing that is important about this shocking experience was that I've never felt quite in my body since that experience has happened. I feel like I truly now have eyes behind my head, and that I'm not completely in the body. And I wrote OSHO about it, and he basically explained to me that a lot of my past had been severed, past momentum, past karmas had been severed by that. The proof of that will be how I live the rest of my life. But it was I've never been the same. And I remember many years later when I came back to India and sat down, there was a person asking a question who had a similar experience that I had, and they were saying how they didn't feel in their body anymore, and it really upset them, and they felt unsettled, and I just started smiling because I thought, well, and then this is actually a blessing. Then I hear Osho say to the person, address them by their name, it says, "You are blessed." This is a very good thing. Shocks can be, in the spiritual path, very, very good things. That is why crisis-filled times, like the times we are in, which were the subject of my book, Predictions for 2011, it depends on how you take them. They can be blessings if you are here to grow. If you're here to stay asleep, they'll be a nightmare. But you have, all of you, the alchemy to change any situation into something good or growing if you choose. And what helps that happen is meditation, the practice of self-observation. That, at least, is my experience, is what really helps one find one's lost innocent intelligence. I mean, Osho used to say that you're born intelligent. You're blessed and born as a birthright, a Buddha. But when you're born into this world, which is the world of the ego and personality, which means persona, which is Latin for mask, you are trained to be stupid. And stupidity is all borrowed. You don't come stupid. So,
well, in addition to that, some say that we're in the Kali Yuga, or the Iron Age, and many believe that we're intentionally dumbed down. In many ways, even if it's not intentional. There's cell phones, iPods, television, chemtrails, fluoride, aspartame, and so on and so forth. So not only do we have to awaken through our own ignorance, but then we've got this additional interference these additional interference waves that are, providing challenges for awakening.
Well, in fact, I coined it I wrote a book called Nostradamus and the Antichrist, codenamed Mabas, which looked at Nostradamus' unique take on the Antichrist prophecies. He had 3 of them, not 1. And the third and final one is living in our times. And I go through this book. It's an ebook that you can download from HogueProphecy.com. And it is I go through this is a 25-year detective trail to find evidence of which candidates could be the candidates. And the prophecies are very specific about what are the steps. And one of the strange things about it is that the most important step is that you've got to be dead. That in the case of the third Antichrist, he dies at the beginning, and it's his death that sets in motion either 25 or 27-year war of the third Antichrist. So we have 4 candidates. There are a lot of candidates in this book. It's a 77,000-word book. There's a lot to talk about this one facet of Nostradamus' prophecies. And in it, I